Welcome to The Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Mossi Thurlow scale,
or MOTS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode.
Welcome, devout followers of the Lost Signals. Today we are reviewing an episode of Film and TV, Four Lions, which I found on an underappreciated film list. And it does definitely, in my opinion, deserves more recognition. I'm Jonathan Ian Manser, here with Stephen Ramosi.
Hello.
And Scott Thurlow.
How goes it?
Alright, so, Stephen, would you like to start with the funny logline?
Sure, this is Monty Python and the Holy Jihad.
Yep.
Yeah, yes.
And you'll find out why.
So I'm going to go over the plot.
He's about to tell you.
We follow 4, and then 5, and then 4 wannabe jihadists in England through what starts off as kind of a comedy piece.
It's a dark satire.
Yeah, where and also, but in the British style of like comedy of errors.
Yeah. It's a bunch of farces, of course. Yeah.
And then it gets very dark towards the end, as these characters you've grown to like, or I think I grew to like, are in a situation where there's no good outcome for them.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, at times, becomes tense over how this will end and who will survive, who will die. I don't know whether I'm going to give it a 3 or a strong 2. So I'm going to pass it off to you guys to convince me one way or the other.
All right. That is the question I've been wrestling with, because I thought it was a pretty strong and well done narrative. I think it was pretty tight for what it was. Like, I didn't feel like it could have been, minutes could be chopped off here and there. I thought it kept it paced very nicely. So, yeah, like, I'm looking at a pretty strong 2. I could be convinced of a 3 for sure, but right now I'm settling on a very solid, well done tale of, like, modern day wannabe jihadists who are just inept at it, and it's like you said, a British style of comedy of them, like, fucking up more or less and arguing with each other in, like, absurd ways. So, what do you think, Steve-O?
I think I'm going to give it a 3. I think this followed a pretty strong through line the entire time. There was everything that I need from a plot in this movie, and I think it was all done pretty well in order to, give all points full credit. I really, you're right. Like, this is an interesting movie, right? Because it's a movie that you follow these jihadists trying to blow themselves up and, like, take out a bunch of people with them, but you see what their actual lives are like, and they're a bunch of bumbling idiots, but it's difficult trying to reconcile one side with the other, and I think that the plot does that really nicely by balancing the parts of their personalities that are, like, repugnant and the parts that are, like, very relatable. And it kind of goes back and forth and tiptoes the wire in terms of doing that. So I'm gonna give it a 3. I like the movie. It gave me a lot to think about, and we'll talk about that in themes as well. But
the characters elevate this work, and portrayals by the actors do. But that's not necessarily going to narrative.
That's true.
There's a lot of thematic qualities here, which we're about to discuss. I don't know. It's weird because I don't have a reason for not giving it a 3, but it's just instinctually I'm like, this is a 2. This is a strong 2, and I'm not going to be able to argue why beyond just this is
Yeah, no, I get you.
instinct.
It's really tough because I'm kind of sort of this. You haven't really convinced me. You did make a fine argument, Steve, and I can totally see giving it a 3. But I think like my gut wants me to give it again a very strong 2, just not quite enough for a 3.
That's fine. What does your heart tell you, and what does your mind tell you? Just switch them.
You tell me.
That's actually your heart.
Okay. Well, my heart and/or brain still tells me to give it a 2 for now, at this point. Even though, like I said, I can see you giving it 3, and that's fine.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I'm going to say the 3.
Scott, you're on to themes.
All right, yeah, like you said, of course, because it follows the lives of a small group of wannabe jihadists who are radical Islam members, essentially, and they're trying to, their entire life goal is to figure out the best way to enact basically a suicide bombing. But, of course, they cannot agree with each other, they argue, they fuck up. And like you said, Steve, at least Omar, like the main one who is sensibly like the most put together of them, they show parts of his home life. He has a wife and a kid, and you have like scenes with him just being like a father and husband to them. But then most of it is him like spending time with his bumbling jihadist buddies, trying to like figure out like the best way to martyr themselves. So like, yeah, it has a lot of like, it's absurd because it's wrapped in this layer of absurdity at least, but there's still something there. Like, what drives people to do such an act, and like why, and how do they go about doing it, and how do they reconcile it with like what, other people around them. So I think it was pretty well handled, especially like you said, it gets a little more serious a bit at the end, like the last, like, say, third of it or so, or less, even less, like half hour-ish. So I think they did a good job of, like you said, Steve-O, showing, like, the repugnant side of, like, people with this mindset, or the ideology, perhaps, in general, but also the human side of it. Like, with the one guy, he literally has to be convinced, like, more, like, along the way. Like, he's basically confused about it, but he goes along with his friends because, ostensibly, they know more than him, and, like, they're telling him, like, hey, no, this is the right thing to do, you'll go to heaven, like, blah, blah, blah. So, I think there's a lot of nuance to it there, and I think it does a really good job, like you said, of having that byline, that through line go throughout the whole story and through the characters, so.
So, I want to continue on where you're talking about the characters and what they represent. So, Omar is, if you have one protagonist in there, it's him.
Yeah.
And I never... It's weird because he's very Western when you see his family.
For sure.
And his brother is a culturally, like Arabic or Pakistani, I believe they are.
Yeah.
The fact where, he doesn't... He views women as lesser than men and all those parts. But the brother is a pacifist. Omar, who's not particularly religious, feels like he's doing all of this not for the greater, but almost for a way to make himself a hero.
Legitimize his life, almost, yeah.
And the brother gets punished for that because of just being Arab. You have the Wedge, or Waj, or whatever.
His best friend.
Yeah, who is just a follower. He's legitimately a follower and is convinced to do things. You have Barry, who is crazy, knows all of the trappings of the religion. Yeah. What's funny is he's Muslim, but he's British. He's like a white British character who's just doing this because he just views this as a kind of whatever madness that's going on in his head. Also, what's
Fessel, I believe,
Fessel is also
friend.
kind of a follower as well, and he's out of there halfway through the film. And then finally, you have the one guy whose name I forget.
Malik, I believe, the guy they sort of draft.
Who's really just a poser.
Yeah.
But all of these different aspects, and none of them are doing it for religion.
No.
They're all doing it for...
that's their excuse for what they're doing, but really it's not actually that, and that's a good point.
It seems like that's a big theme of this movie, is like the more westernized you are, the more radical you tend to be, I guess, or whatever, as in terms of that religion. The most religious people in this film are the most passive, the
ones who are least enacting acts of terrorism.
I don't mean to say the most passive, but the least violent, right?
Well, Barry is saying that we need to bomb a mosque in order to awaken all of the...
That will galvanize them all to... Sure. And again, it's an absurd, dark, joke, essentially.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I think this movie has a lot to say about law enforcement as well. The cops just go after the wrong people at every turn, and they go after the people that have the trappings of traditional Islam.
The stereotypes.
They go after Omar's brother, who is, very religious. and has a cupboard for his wife and her friends or whatever. And like, you know, that was a pretty good callback when the cops bust in. But like, yeah, they have that. They have the guy sitting at the table with Waj or however you pronounce his name. I forget what they said, but like, who gets shot instead of him. And I don't know if that's specifically I don't know if that one was specifically because I think it's because he pushed the bomb across the table to him. Yeah. So it was right in front of him. But you know, there's just this running the sniper on top of the roof shoots the Wookiee instead of Omar when he's running in the suit.
At the marathon.
At the marathon. Can't tell the difference between bears in a way. But I think that's a greater commentary.
Sure, of course it's an allegory for that, yes.
They argue for like 5 minutes about what a bear is, and man, like just like a lot of that stuff is really like kind of just under the surface. They're told in jokes, but they're talking about what's happening.
But making a serious comment upon it.
In terms of law enforcement or in terms of like the way people view Muslims. And I thought this movie did a really good job with that type of stuff. So I'm going to give themes a very strong 1 on this.
I agree.
Yeah, don't have much more to add. Strong 1 for sure.
All right, Steven, would you like to go on with antagonist?
Sure. I guess idiocy is the antagonist. I mean, I don't know if I have like a super strong
this is an
antagonist in this one. I'll probably end up giving it a 0 unless somebody gives a good argument. But like, the biggest thing that haunts them the entire movie is their own idiocy and like argumentative nature between themselves. Like Barry and Omar's struggle to be like, the number 1 of the group or whatever, and I mean, I don't know. I think that there's not really that super focused, strong antagonist so much as just kind of they all fill that role when they need to, or, you know, other characters fill that role when they need to, and it kind of goes in between, you know, all of them at some point.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Like, I was leaning towards a 0 because of that very fact. Like, they are basically their own antagonists at various times in various, like, combinations, more or less. So, like, there's no external force, like, basically antagonizing them, really. They're all, like, again, like you said, they're trying to accomplish this mission / quest for, like, some reason in their own minds that'll make it greater. But really, like, they're just doing it to make themselves feel better. Like, they think it'll fulfill them in some way.
So you just said there's no external force to make them feel bad, and I think that's a really good point. Is like, I think that's part of the point of this movie is that like there is no solid reason that any of them give throughout this movie why they're doing this, or like why they want to do this. It's just kind of like
it's like they assume they have to. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a strong commentary, but I don't think it makes for a strong antagonist per se.
Things that aren't the antagonist in this is Islam. In fact, for a movie about jihadists, this has almost nothing to do with Islam aside from it just being a...
it's there as like a
impetus for the police aren't particularly... at times, they're very ineffective, even almost as ineffective as the jihadists.
It's a good parallel there, for sure.
So, yeah, you're right. There is no kind of... Not that it necessarily needs it either, but...
Yeah, it's not like a fault in the movie. Yeah. It's sort of the framework and the setup, so I think it's going to have to be a default 0, but not because it was bad or something. Like, I think that was on purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, I'm on to protagonists. So, is it the 5 or is it Omar?
I would say, like, it's mostly the 5 of them because you do follow them. Yes, you follow Omar more than anyone else, but you do follow them each individually, like, throughout the film. So, like, while the focus may be a bit, like, more centered on Omar, I think his cadre counts collectively as the protagonist.
So, I'm going to talk about Omar then, quickly, and then I'll pass. So, the first 2/3 of this is kind of a pure, like, comedy, as we mentioned, and Omar doesn't have much of an arc, but his arc really comes in strong during the mission to... when they're going to bomb a marathon. And when he realizes that he's pushing a friend of his into becoming a suicide bomber when it's not in the heart, and that's against his idealized tenets of what this act means. And he tries desperately at the end to rectify those mistakes. And it's actually very engaging. And then throughout, you meet his family, you understand not why he's doing it, aside from the fact that his wife's enabling him. But in a way, she at one point says, "You were much more interesting when you were fully devoted to being a suicide bomber." Yeah. And perhaps she liked the excitement of like this.
Sure.
He's going to be a war hero in a sense. But yeah, like alone, I think I would give him a 1 for protagonist. But
yeah, I mean, like you said, he's the strongest one because we get a little more time with him. But I think they all have like their own distinct personalities. Certainly, Barry was like, more like belligerent, if you will, and argumentative of the group. But they did show like he was at least decently skilled when it came down to like make the accoutrements for what they need. But even like his other two friends, his best friend Waj, of course, had some pretty good characterization. Like you said, he's basically being pulled along, right? He's just going along with it because Omar's his best friend, and he feels like he's supposed to be doing what their little, again, quest that they're doing with them.
He's the heart of the story.
For sure. So like, and yeah, he's not all that there, not all that there. Neither is Fessel even, and he gets sort of, again, farcically but comically, darkly killed. Yeah. And then they bring in like, the other guy that they met, Malik, I believe was his name. So yeah, I think they all have like their own distinct personalities and fleshed out like, again, this ridiculous little group of friends whose goal is to enact like to go down in the books of history, as, Muslim warriors. But like, I think it all worked together. It's, again, a small ensemble. So I think they're all going to get a pretty strong, like 1 overall. But yes, my final thought is Omar definitely has like the most nuances, the most explored the most.
I think, well, Fessel's death was a really good, like a really important character moment.
Yeah.
Right? And like, that was kind of the moment where you realized nothing is going to turn out okay in this movie. Because it was just like such a dark turn. It happened so fast.
Yeah, it's true.
In the middle of like a freaking like almost a Monty Python-esque like
or Benny Hill.
Yeah, or Benny Hill-esque moment.
But it also showed all the players that the stakes rose for all of them,
exactly.
And us as viewers.
Yep.
Yeah.
True point.
I think that even at the end, when Omar walks into a pharmacy, against everything that he actually wanted to do, and just, that's the very end of the movie. The protagonists in this film, and, like, they all have these moments, right? Like, the protagonists in this film, I think all 5 of them have really strong moments of where you understand their character, and that makes when, spoiler alert, they all die. That makes when they die a lot more
that much more tragic, yeah, sure.
Right? You get like it's weird. You can like almost point out. So I pointed out like the moment where well, we haven't talked about this yet, but like the moment where what's his name?
Malik, I think.
The
latecomer to their group.
Yeah, when they find him in the room with in the apartment with I forget what it is, Angela or something, the next door neighbor, and it's like, oh shit, we've been discovered. They try to make him kill her. That was one of my favorite moments of the movie, just because it was like, holy shit, this guy was about to like lose his shit over having to kill her. He's freaking out, and then they have to move everything. And that's the reason that Fessel dies, right?
Yeah, it's all comedy errors.
Like, I don't know. I'm going on a Chris rant right now, but there's like the tying together of like all these little things throughout the movie that I noticed and are really well done and make the characters,
each of which builds a protagonist,
very strong when they do in fact eventually die.
I just have one last thing I want to say, that this cast of characters would make a good like bank robbery or heist type film.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's where the strength lies. Even though yes, it's about jihadists,
like a Guy Ritchie film,
but more in the but more in the like comedic type thing, and then and that's where it's not a
like
story about jihad. It's a story about these 5 people attempting commit a crime, regardless of what that crime is.
Sure, just sort of framed again in that. But I'm giving them all collectively a 1, but certainly Omar, again, is probably the strongest. But it all still works.
Scott, supporting.
All right, so that doesn't leave much. Like, there's the guy that Omar works with, I think Mark is his name, that he's like a security attendant, like a train station or whatever, and he runs into him a couple of times. There's, like you said, the neighbor chick who seems like spaced out on drugs or something. That's what it seemed like. She was completely oblivious to what was happening.
What was her name? Alice? Angela?
I think like Alice might be it, but it doesn't matter that much because they were not really given all that much characterization. Like, they meet a couple of side characters, sure, here and there. Like, for example, Omar and Waj go to Pakistan, like, briefly to ostensibly train with the like IS over there, but quickly, like, their ineptness, like, quickly realize, like, they're not cut out for it, so they leave.
Kill Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, like, that's like the biggest trick joke ever. They accidentally fire a fucking RPG, like, in the wrong direction. They're trying to kill a drone, but it blows up, like, the camp, essentially, that they were left. And so, like, they're like, oh, we're going back to England. It's like, that was absurd, too. They get back. Barry's like, how'd it go? Like, oh, it went great. They're like, no. He's like, no, it didn't. I can clearly see it in your face.
Bollocks.
Yeah, bollocks. You fucked it up, didn't you? So, like, all I'm saying is, it doesn't really leave a lot for side characters. And if we said Omar was a protagonist and his buddies were side characters, of course it would get a 1. But because we all lumped them together and thinking pro tag, I think I might have to go with the default 0 because of it, unless you got something. I have
one character.
Okay.
I think two. I'll mention 2 characters quickly.
Okay, hit me.
The first one is the important one. It's his brother.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah,
he is plot and thematic essential.
That's a fair point. But he didn't have much characterization. He had some, but go on.
No, it's his. A lot of this work is about facial expressions and what's going on. When you see him before he gets taken, they're playing soccer in the rain with a bunch of his fellow friends. Which, again, just prior to that, on the way to do the bombing, they use the excuse that they're going to soccer to play.
That's true.
So, I don't know. I think he was an important piece to the puzzle.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
And also Benedict Cumberbatch as the world's worst
negotiator,
and him playing against type because he's usually so suave.
Yeah. I mean, he was in the film for 5 minutes, and
I think a good cameo can
elevate.
I think there's the brother, and then Benedict Cumberbatch cameo brings it up to a 1 for me.
That was good. Also, his wife was really good, and his kid was pretty good.
That's a fair point. Yeah,
so
almost family.
I'm going to give it a 1 for basically his brother, his wife, and his kid. The other characters in the movie were all right, but like you said, they didn't have much going on.
All right. Yeah,
but
you're right.
I'm gonna stay with the 1.
You guys convinced me, especially the point of his brother. That is true. Like, he's a very important piece. Without him, the film, like, a bit of it will fall apart. It would lose some pillars of its themes and of its. So I'll give it credit on that and that front. And yes, I do agree. Secondarily, Omar's wife and kid were pretty good too. So fair enough. Good point. Flip me on that.
Okay, Steven, dialogue.
I thought the dialogue in this was pretty brilliant, actually. It was funny throughout, very snappy, and, like, I guess because it was British, I was probably a little more impressed automatically. But, like, the dialogue in Four Lions was just spot on, really good. Like I said, really funny, and really kept my engagement super high throughout. So.
Their banter and jokes are quite good. Especially I liked it when you'd switch to, I guess he's speaking Pakistan or whatever he's speaking.
Urdu.
Yeah. So he would, like, randomly insult people, like, and each other.
Vicious insults.
And like ridiculous insults too. So, like, that I thought was a nice little point, like, to have. I enjoy that when that happened. But even, like, the regular jokes and the gags, and like I said, like, when they're bantering and arguing with each other, like, it's all, again, farcically absurd, but in a very British way. So yeah, I'm giving it a very strong 1.
Also, just quickly, they did a good job of having different, maybe not regional, but, like, different class of, for British accents. So you could tell who's a little bit more educated amongst the group and who's a little bit more street. And that worked quite well.
Now, that's a good point. So I'll unfold that into dialogue and still give it a pretty strong to solid 1.
The style. It's as a comedic genre piece, I think it handled its jokes very well. There'd be a dialogue joke happening, and then in the corner of the screen there'll be a character who's not involved responding facially, to what's going on. I felt it was really well handled and did justice as a comedy piece. And you had the dialogue, which you just talked about, and mixed in with the visual gags.
Yep.
Worked.
Yeah, it's not like the most beautiful thing ever shot, but it looks pretty good. It seems like they had a pretty small budget, and using that, I think they did a good job with the cinematography and everything. But really, the shining star is what you just said. Like, the way that they framed the comedy in this movie was really spot on, and like it worked almost all the time.
Yeah, the joke setups were perfect. Like, pretty solid. The callbacks and the brick jokes, and like I said, so it's not shot as if it were a mockumentary, but it almost has that kind of feel to it at times. But regardless, as you said, for the genre, I think it did its job perfectly well, and I'm gonna give it a pretty solid 1.
I just have one scene I want to highlight because I thought was really funny.
Good.
When the brother gets taken into the custody, and he's in a shipping container.
Yeah.
They go, when you entered this warehouse, it's American property, and now that you enter the shipping container, it's recognized as
Egyptian. Yeah.
So, the satire works really well.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll give it credit on that, 100%.
All right, and Scott, on to you with a recommendation.
Yeah. So it's like you mentioned, you found this on sort of an like films that should be seen, but probably weren't like as much. That had like a smaller release or a smaller reception. Yeah, I think it's a really pretty spot on. So it's from 2010. So like around that time. Yeah, I felt it does a good job of like highlighting the farcical aspects of some of this stuff and just being a pretty good dark comedy movie given the framework and the setup and like we just said, the portrayals and especially the jokes and the way they unfolded. So I absolutely would recommend For Land. I'd say check it out. It was on Hulu for us, so it's easily enough available now. Just that, yeah. I mean, if you like the Britishish kind of stuff that we just mentioned and sort of updated a bit in a modern light, taking on the subject matter that we just said, I think you'll enjoy it.
I think a lot of people would feel really uncomfortable watching this movie.
I thought you might say that. One of you might, but
I'm not going to not recommend it. But if you are unwilling to see the humanity in suicide bombers, you are not going to like this movie. So, I mean, I think
it may not be for everybody, but
I think it's a movie worthy of watching.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they do a really good job showing people who happen to be suicide bombers acting like the people that they are in everyday life, if not a little more ridiculous and stupid.
Yeah.
But I think this movie does what it wants to do, and it does it really well.
Yeah, well said.
I'm going to recommend it, and if you don't like it, I don't care.
The best way to defeat something that you're afraid of is to mock it and depower it that way. And I think that this movie takes the piss out of
that's a good point.
Every single person who would seek to do an act like this.
Yeah.
And I imagine, actually, that like the underwear bomber and the shoe bomber, more or less like these people.
Maybe, but you're right. That's a good point what you said about that. Like, it does sort of like serve to like, if not humanizing it, but certainly to an extent, then yeah, like defanging it a bit, demystifying it, in an entertaining way.
And so I would fully recommend it. All right.
Yeah, for sure. So what do we got there?
All right, so let's go to the videotape. Let's go to the final scores. Scott and Ian both gave it an 8, and I gave it the high score with a 9, which leaves us with an 8.666.
I think that's pretty spot on for this film.
No, yeah. I would actually agree with that completely.
Yeah, I think it's earned it. I think it deserves it, and it was solid.
Yeah.
Entertaining.
I'm sorry. It's not an 8.6. It's 8.3.
Still fine. A 0.3 difference.
No, I now completely disagree.
You're foolish. You ruined it. You're just as inept as they are.
Idiot.
Anyway.
Right. I'm Jonathan Manzer here with Stephen Hermosi.
Have a good night.
And Scott Thurlow.
See you next time.
Editing and engineering by Jonathan Ian Manzer. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or mods?